obviously called books.
Welcome back. It's good to see you, Carl. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
And you will notice I hesitated on using our name
Yes.
because we're thinking of just dropping a lot of the garbage that's in our name. You know, like this is that whole when you've been doing a podcast for a while.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
We can talk about the name in a minute. If you're watching this on YouTube,
Yes, well, of course you would have noticed. Now, this is the moment where you really get to test whether we have a face for radio.
Exactly. Yeah. Listen, if you're listening to this on the radio and the podcast, wherever you get your podcast app, we're having a go at sticking it on YouTube. So.
Yes, and potentially we'll find out whether we can do Spotify. But
exactly.
yeah, we got some video and some audio.
It's great to see you.
It is, and we love doing this.
Yeah.
And the
great news about the break we've had is you must have read so many good books.
Well, yeah, I've continued my reading,
right.
and I've really, to be honest, I've missed this because I've been backing up stuff ready to talk to you about, and knowing that we'll have a good conversation.
Great way to read books. But so you're unlocking great books.
Unlocking great books. Yeah. I think we're going to land on unlocking great books. Yeah. You'll probably see that in the title and go, oh, it's changed. The other thing is, like, we've done 50 episodes, so this is our 5th season of this podcast.
Right.
So
episode 51.
Well, I don't want to name what number it is, but it's around that, and so this is really good. You know, like. Well, we're going to play around with a new format.
Anyway, look, if you don't remember, the 232 part of the podcast is basically 232 degrees Celsius is close enough to 451 degrees Fahrenheit, which, as you'll know if you remember, Fahrenheit 451 is
the temperature that books burn at, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so we played around with that, a little bit obscure.
It was too geeky.
Well, I have a habit of sometimes coming up with geeky things.
Look, so, we've got a bunch of great books lined up for this year.
Yeah, this is great. We're going to play around with the peers thing again, so there'll be some, there'll be companion books, which allows us to talk a little bit deeper about topics. And
today we're going to kick off with a book that I think lots of people know, and maybe people haven't read.
Maybe heard the term.
Yeah, or haven't read it for a while.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Eli Pariser's The Filter Bubble.
Yeah.
And in this episode, I think we're going to talk about where it fits into broader critical thinking. We're going to talk about, how the internet follows you and how it targets you and what kind of problems that provides.
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating book for the fact that it's an older book, but a relevant book still, and maybe it was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
We'll go into that in more detail.
Yeah, that's going to be great, and we'll cover off some great academic debates.
Well, you always bring the great. Let's be real.
Look, I mean, the book sits within a context.
No,
right?
true.
So we need to understand that context.
True.
And its limitations and its strengths within that context.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let's get into it.
Okay.
Books. I need my books.
All right, let's start with this author, Eli Pariser.
Yeah, so Eli's a fascinating guy. So obviously this is the book that made him famous. But he also founded a new site called Upworthy. Do you know Upworthy?
I was doing a little bit of reading about this. Fascinating, isn't it? Fascinating story.
Yeah, so he formed it with the guy who's the managing director from The Onion, which is brilliant, right? Two of my favourite sources.
Yeah.
And Upworthy was all about good news, which fits beautifully with the book we'll talk about in a minute.
Totally.
But wanted to create a social media environment just for good news and good news stories.
Yeah.
But he's also involved in, is it called The New Public?
Yes.
Which is...
I think that's the follow-on from Upworthy.
Right, okay. Yeah. Well, that's a direct offshoot of the book, right? Because that's about how do you build decent online spaces with good rules and, where people get exposed to things they wouldn't otherwise.
So Eli's got a history of political activism.
He's an activist, right? And he was actually involved. I think originally he was running a campaign against Bush.
Yes, it's the Gulf War.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's how far it goes back. He's not that old. He's a child of the 80s, isn't he?
Yeah.
So that's Eli Pariser. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
TED Talks had 5 million views.
Oof.
So if you don't want to watch the podcast, listen to the podcast. Watch the podcast or read the damn book. You can just go watch the TED
No, we always read the damn book. Yeah.
So interesting guy. Really interesting guy. Clearly writes well. Obviously trained as a journalist or been a journalist for a very long time. Yeah. You can tell in the style and the rhythm of the book.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so let's jump into the book. What's the subtitle?
Yeah, so I mean, I hadn't actually written that down.
So the book's called The Filter Bubble,
yes.
What the Internet is Hiding from You.
Yes, that's right.
And actually, that captures so much about it.
Yeah, and in a way, the book is eloquently simple in what it's anchored around, isn't it? So like the concept of personalization.
Yep.
So the fact that the internet attempts to personalize itself for us is the filter part.
Yeah.
But then the other part, which I think is, it's touched upon in the book, but it's a key theme, is the fact that this bubble is completely invisible to us. Yeah. So the lens that we're looking through is completely invisible.
Yeah, so that's a really good...
two key themes, isn't there?
Yeah, and the point we should make, right? I think the book's 2011, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
So it's interesting reading it now.
Yeah, so you've read it recently, haven't you?
I read it, I finished it, I read it again on the weekend. And I used to teach it, right?
Right.
But it's amazing how prescient it seems. Let me just read one thing to you in light of, and look, the Unlocking Great Books podcast is not a political podcast. We don't necessarily don't have a political point of view, but listen to this.
I think, I know what you're going to say.
And see if you can think about, so this is from page 173, and it says, when you do something in the public sphere, it behooves you to know something about how the public sphere works. How did this country get this way? What was the history of the relationship with technology? The problem is with hackers, they don't know any of that, and that's why it worries me to have these people in charge of public policy. Not because they're bad, just because they're undereducated.
Oh, yeah. So this is talking about who's doing the filtering effectively, isn't it? In the invisible web of that.
You go back to your point at the beginning, right? The book's written at a point in time when particularly Google, but also Facebook.
Yeah, so we should put those historic marks in here because we're sitting in 2025. I always have to check myself because I always still say 2024.
Right.
It's been so long since we've been sitting together. But we're talking, I think a real key catalyst for this book, and he talks about it as a point in time, is when Google Instant came in. And I was like, what's Google Instant? Like, I've heard of, obviously Google's well known for its search engine and things like that. But Google Instant is when you start typing a search in Google and it tells you what it should be. Yeah. And that does my head in all the time.
Right.
And it's a really crazy way. Like you start typing and all of a sudden you've got a list of 20 options. Yeah. And sometimes it's really helpful. You're like, oh yeah, that's kind of what I was wanting to ask. But when you think of it through the lens of this book, you go, oh.
But isn't that a theme that we've talked about throughout this whole series, right? As the world enables us to live more convenient lives, it often takes away something fundamental from us.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Because not just that, but his point about personalization, targeting, automation, we'll talk about all of those things. Basically, the argument is, as you get to live in your own filter bubble and see only the things that you want to see, it actually undermines the things that hold us together as a civic society.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the this is the era that it's a 2011 book. Google Instant came out in 2010, but also Facebook's on the rise. Yeah. These big tech companies, all these big platforms are growing massively, aren't they?
So that's the bit about the book I think that's the weakest, clearly, right? So he talks about things like Yahoo and things like that. But if you don't think about necessarily brands and
products, think about the brands. Yeah, exactly. Think about the engines. So where do we want to start? Do we want to start with this personalization thing is really interesting, isn't it? And I have to tell you a little story because I thought sometimes, you have these weird experiences. Sometimes they're very timely for a podcast, of course. But I joined Substack a few months ago. So I've started to write on Substack. And because it's a new platform, I've joined completely and utterly as an invisible, I'm a new person. So I went on to Substack. I didn't really know what Substack was. Thought, I'll have a look around. I clicked on one thing, which was around the US election and post-election and Trump and all this kind of stuff. Just interesting, just watching something. Next thing you know, my whole feed is full of that. Yeah. So I have had to delete all the things that I followed on Substack to clear the algorithm. So because it's but that shows you what happens, and then you stack. You wouldn't even know that's going on, but it was very in my face.
And everybody's got that experience, right? An ad follows you around the internet. Clearly cookies do that, but the point is it's not just cookies, it's a whole lot of attributes that are being harvested. There are commercial companies that are harvesting information from you without knowing it, right? And that's the interesting piece.
That's exactly right.
And there there are lots of arguments in the book, right? What does that do for a civic society? What does that do for our privacy? What does that do with how we're going to get manipulated? That's essentially the thrust of the book. And he saw it coming, right? And now we live with it.
And that's what I find fascinating. You talk about the timing of the book. This is almost written from the kind of naive, I think something's about to happen perspective. And then, of course, we can look back and go, 100%, you nailed it. It's like,
no, it's
because the other one I've got a burner email address that I just use for newsletters and all sorts of stuff. Right. But it's got a...
That's very clever, by the way,
Yeah, which maybe life hack tip, I don't know, whatever. But I have no personal attributes against this profile. So it's basically no one really knows who I am. And it confuses the hell out of YouTube. Like, it is so hilarious.
So that's a good point, right? So the algorithm is an automated thing. It doesn't have anybody interceding in it. And so it can easily put together a picture of you, which isn't a representative view of you, right? And that's part of the problem. As you said, you click on one article about the US election, suddenly it thinks,
you're one of those guys.
Yeah. So I think the important part of the book, one of the important parts of the book is it references a really old argument about media that we'll come back to in a minute, but about the idea that, and I didn't know this till I read the book, the word media literally means the layer in between.
Yeah, it's Latin for the middle layer, which is incredible.
And the point being, the middle layer in newspapers used to be editors who were informed, thought they had a civic obligation, certainly in the days of Fair and Balanced, right?
Yes.
So they would make sure that you would read things and see things that they thought were good for you, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with the personalization thing, the only thing that the algorithm's doing is having a look at your activity. Zuckerberg, I think, said in the book, it's quoted in the book, right? People don't make much of a distinction between the New Yorker and some random blogger. As though those things were equivalent.
Yes.
And the point that Pariser's making is they're not.
Yeah, so he used the term amateur curators, hasn't he? So there was always that argument, wasn't there? And there was very famous, argument, wasn't it? Lippman versus Dewey around the newspaper editor, the control that newspapers had. Valid point to some degree, and I think we've seen the polarization of media these days, which has exacerbated that.
Yeah.
However, it's now there is who is doing the curating, and that's the invisible bit, isn't it? Where he's saying, we don't know what is the algorithm that's pushing stuff for us, filtering stuff for us, working out what we like.
So I really like you've referenced the Dewey-Lippmann debate, because I think, in many regards, that's what this book's picked up on. Right? It's that difference between what you like and what's good for you.
Yes.
And we'll come back and talk about this.
Yes.
He talks about obesity, but I think the metaphor of digital nutrition is brilliant, right? So the Lippmann-Dewey debate is a bit more nuanced than that. Like the Lippmann-Dewey debate is, how do you have a functioning democracy when public opinion is being shaped by editors?
Yeah.
So in that days, the media was the editors, right?
Yes.
And if you want to have a civic body that's informed, well, one of the arguments Lippmann was making was actually what you call public opinions being shaped by media.
Yes.
And Dewey,
which is true.
Which is true. And Dewey, of course, is the profoundly democratic philosopher who tried to refute it 3 different ways. That argument never got resolved, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. Really, and to be fair, it probably isn't resolved.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
They do raise a good question, though, don't they? In the book, which is, did newspapers create public opinion? Right? Does the internet actually create the thing that we're talking about? So that's brilliant, right?
So let's carry on down that loop a little bit, because it's like, why is this problematic? So the fact that we are getting personalized content,
because there is a distinction between what you enjoy and what's good for you, right? Like that. I think nutrition's the right metaphor. Like, left to our own devices, we might want to eat donuts. And
actually, it's a really good metaphor when you think about it. Yeah.
But we all know that we have to eat things we don't like.
Because it's a human behaviour thing, again, isn't it?
And to function in a civic society where there are people that aren't like you, you have to understand them.
Yeah.
And if all the algorithm's doing is feeding you news from people that think like you, then number one, you're going to think
it's kind of like it's just eating sugar, isn't it? In some respects, carrying on.
Yeah.
I thought that was really great. The concept, he introduced the concept of, maybe he brought up the concept of bonding capital and bridging capital.
Great point again. This is Putman's work, social capital, right?
Yes.
So there's the capital that keeps us together in our tribes.
Yep.
And then there's the social capital that enables us to link between tribes.
Yeah, so this is the bridging thing. So he gave the analogy of, like going into a room with people from different backgrounds, you have to adapt to that and you have to find common ground and all those really helpful things. I think the term liquid networks as well, like, the ability to move in different networks versus hanging in a room with all the people from the same thing where you don't have to work to find that common ground, do you? Because it's there.
Yeah.
And
it's a good point, though. Let's not leave that point just now, because the point is, and this is why the bubble's been so successful. The bubble accelerates bonding. Capital.
That's right.
It makes you feel like you belong and there are lots of people like you. But it actually works against bridging capital.
And then we've got the issue on the internet of who are you bonding with?
Yes.
And is it really is it as stronger, I guess, view or whatever as it's perceived to be? And where do those views come from, which is the kind of the nefarious activity around bots and stuff like that, which is feeding stuff.
So there's a great quote by that American senator or diplomat that says you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Right? I mean, civic society runs on us having a shared body of facts.
Yeah.
And, the point is, if you think, unless you're exposed to counterfactual thinking, unless you're taught how to be a critical thinker and look for disconfirming evidence, you are going to think that everybody.
So this is that whole confusing data and opinion versus fact, isn't it? And so this is and
that's why it's prescient, right?
Yes.
Because he doesn't talk about fake news and
not
alternative
at all.
facts.
No.
But we live in a world of fake news and alternative facts, which, if you listen to someone like Bob Hoffman, is directly a result of automation and personalization.
Which is the base of the book, isn't it? So, and the fact that we're being exposed to this. Can we talk about the business model? Because I think this invisibility thing. When I was preparing or thinking about this podcast last night, I have to admit I was quite disturbed by that, and maybe a kind of good, good kind of read.
I'm glad you mentioned business models, right? Because clearly this gets set up as a problem, and it may not be the problem we think it is for reasons we'll talk about in a minute. But the only people that want to know more about you are people that want to sell you something.
Yes.
Big corporations, right? And people that want to control you, governments.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a problem. So Google's now the largest advertising company in the world. It started out with the motto, do no harm, something like that. Yeah. And now it's the world's largest. I mean, the reason they want this information is so they can sell you shit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They're not, but obviously other governments want to know about you for other reasons. So that's the huge problem, right? This is about data harvesting to build up a picture of you remotely.
Yes, the only which people then gets sold for advertising.
Sold for everybody. And he has a great point, doesn't he? I don't know where that there's a really good quote about. Imagine if your phone company said it was going to publish your phone conversation for anyone to hear, right? Right?
Yeah.
But that's precisely what the social media platforms do. They publish your phone conversations for the highest bidder. And remember the rule, if you don't pay for the service, if it's free, you're not the customer, you're the product.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that.
If you're not paying for something, then you're the product. This is the cost, like he described it as the cost of personalization. So personalization, you get to click on things, see all these relevant things. However, behind the scenes, these companies are just harvesting and turning it into dollars and massive dollars, obviously. Huge.
So we'll come back and we need to talk about the critique of the book in a minute. But we talked about it's 2011, and it's prescient. And there are some things about it, some of the technology it refers to, make it seem quite old. The other thing I think that makes it seem quite old is there's still that techno-optimism of the early days.
Oh, 100%.
Like the quotes.
However.
Well, there's a guy, the Sun Systems founder, they quote Bill Joy, and Bill Joy says, if the internet isn't helping us solve the really big problems in the world, what use is it? That seems like such a quaint view of the internet now, right?
Yeah. Well, all of this, maybe that's it. Quaint is the kind of thing that's, although, and this is what I found really brilliant about the book again, there's a line in here. they're social revolutionaries when it suits them, and they're neutral, amoral businessmen when it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that rings truer than ever, as we've seen in recent times, where we've seen all the tech companies go, my God, we're about to get regulated. Let's suck up to the president.
Yeah, we'll change.
And what does he say? Oh, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. And we'll just go back and whatever. And also, I think we're in a very interesting time. I'm not a deep tech analyst or anything like that, but you do wonder if this revenue model is going to start to unravel.
Now, great segue, right?
Yes.
So the interesting thing about this, reading it in 2025, is that there is now a move away from marketing automation. Because marketing automation doesn't really work the way we were promised.
100%.
So this idea of micro-targeting, I show you ads that are utterly relevant to you, but actually nobody clicks on banner ads.
Yes.
In fact, Bob Hoffman says you're more likely to complete Navy SEALs training than you are to click on a banner ad. Like literally, it doesn't work the way we thought it does. And worse than that, there's a backlash now, particularly in Europe, against that ability to track you, right? You know,
actually, their laws have probably made it really hard.
Exactly.
For these
So that doesn't
now,
work.
Yeah.
So
plus the potential breakup of these companies and all that kind of stuff.
Because what we're talking about here is a thing called surveillance capitalism. This is Shoshana Zuboff's work, right? And we need to review her book at some point. But the idea that we created a model of capitalism which is based on tracking you and surveilling you. Yeah. I think there's a retreat from that from some.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's just not working the way we thought.
And and also I've heard that from professionals who work in the space who also said digital marketing's kind of like they're leaving it up to the Facebook algorithms or whatever. It just doesn't work anymore.
Well, so what Bob Hoffman talks about is how much fraud has been created.
Yes.
Right. So how many bots there are to show your digital ads too.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's what you do if you're selling ads on the basis. And he talks about how many times Facebook have to purge millions of false accounts.
Yeah, wow.
You know, so, it's just...
So therefore it's just become junk, isn't it, in some respect?
And look, that's the great thing as well, reading this guy, because I'm reminded of Neil Postman, who we talked about before, who talked about TV.
That's true, yeah.
In that book, he said, we've reduced information to a form of garbage.
Yeah.
And we've done it
and we've done it here on a wide scale. Another great line, just to pick it up, tech is neither good or bad, nor is it neutral.
Yes.
I thought that was a really, it's Kranzberg's first law or whatever.
And he
kind of says technology is no more benevolent than a screwdriver. Depends how you use it. And I think that's a really good thing here.
So we're segueing now into what do we think of the book. I think the book needs updating. I also think the book's a bit of a mess. And that one's a great example because when he's talking about guns, and clearly he's anti-guns, he dismisses the line that guns don't kill people, kill people, right?
Yes.
And yet he does say with a screwdriver. Now, like, you can't have it both ways.
No. Yeah. There's a good point.
So I thought this book was actually a bit of a mess. And what I mean by that is it talks a lot about technology. So it kind of goes into a debate about techno-determinism. It talks about technological change. We get a bunch of stuff about psychology and consumer behaviour. We just he seems to pick up threads and run with them.
Without bringing them into
a really
nice order.
way.
Is that the way to describe it?
Yeah.
However, if you were... I found this kind of markedly changed the way I thought about this. It picked up a topic I was aware of, but it gave me a much...
But you've heard the expression filter bubble before we read the book, right?
Maybe, but I don't know if it's as widespread as it could be, which is why a book like this is very important.
Well, I'm stuck in my own filter bubble where it's used all the time. Shout out to Mike Grimshaw. Grim, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
We're all in our own filter bubbles.
But for instance, though, right, just one example I remember because I know his work well. Like he starts talking about David Bohm's work on dialogue. Really interesting, but what a rabbit hole to go down.
Oh, there are lots of rabbit holes.
There are lots of rabbit holes, and that's what I mean about it being a bit of a mess.
Yeah. There's some good segues though. I like the fact that the topic, it was very easy to reflect on this book and go, okay, what were the main themes of the book? It was good, and I think they were important things to call out. And the fact that they were called out damn near 15 years ago is kind of pinch yourself a bit, isn't it?
Look, as I said, I think it's it's an important book, and I think it's prescient. The closer you read it, and the more you dig into it, the less it stands up to criticism. So I found some academic critiques that I want to talk about. But the most important critique, I think, which I never even thought about, is he's basically talking about the joy of serendipity, but never does he come up with a stable working definition of serendipity.
Okay, right.
Like people call him out for,
Yeah.
you say serendipity means this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
And it's like that, pornography, I know it when I see it. But if your argument hinges on you need to be exposed to things you don't normally think about in order to have that aha moment, then we need to understand more about that aha moment.
Yeah, and maybe that's that whole... He doesn't answer that question for you, does he?
Yeah.
Or how to do that. He kind of just says, it's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't play here. This
Right.
is not the place.
So the much more profound critique comes out of essentially the sociology literature that says it's not the technology that's the problem, it's the people.
Yes.
Right. And there's
Yep.
so there's an academic critique that calls it the myth of the filter bubble.
Ah.
And what they talk about, which I never thought about before.
Yeah, okay.
So Pariser's argument is Sean and Carl are going to be exposed to different kinds of information and they're going to end up with different interpretations and they might end up acting differently and that causes dissent.
Yeah.
But what the academics point out is actually Carl and Sean can be exposed to exactly the same piece of information and still have different interpretations.
Yes.
So actually, it's not about necessarily the different information streams, which is what he sees as being the kind of prime mover. Actually, the real problem...
Interesting.
Yeah, so the central question actually becomes how do different groups in society come to develop such highly divergent personal readings of the same information?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a good call.
It is a good call, right?
It is. However, the counter to that is that we're not reading the same stuff. And I think when I think about the internet and like you think about our world of information, I particularly think about it from the lens of my daughter, like who's turning 13.
Yeah.
And she's grown up in this world where she's been exposed.
Sure.
Like, it's just the volume of stuff, isn't it? And I think that's the fundamental difference. So,
but
like if you were getting exposed to new ideas, you could only consume... You can only physically consume so much television.
Yeah, totally.
And so many books.
But what if if that's a symptom rather than a cause?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. It is a good point.
And I'm sure we're going to say that.
Well, is it feeding? It's feeding a bigger thing, and I think that's your point.
And the academic critique is, the reason the Americans talk about this is the American two-party system is so hidebound.
There's a whole bunch of other factors, isn't it? It's just feeding that,
exactly,
isn't it?
right? Like it means it's a very different thing.
Yeah.
Like what kind of world gave rise to this?
Yeah.
Right. So that's...
I find myself doing that a lot with stuff out of America where there's a hang on a second.
Yeah.
And you've experienced America firsthand a lot more than I have, but there's that, you got to go hang on a second. Different place,
different assumptions.
Yeah, and
very different
and a very different history and culture, and these cultural wars that are going on over there, all that kind of stuff.
But even with those critiques standing in that kind of broader sociological environment, what we're both saying is this book is food for thought, right? Like
100%.
It's provocative,
100%.
and some of that provocation might not stand up to close scrutiny, but thinking really hard about what are you consuming.
Yes,
I love that idea of information obesity, digital nutrition. You've got to eat your greens, mate.
Yeah, that's right.
You've got to go and read some serious news websites.
Yeah, and ask those questions. I wanted to draw just a quick parallel. I finished a great book this year called Unmasking AI, and I think I've talked to you about this book by Joy Buolamwini. So, and that's another great TED talk. If you go and watch Joy's talk, and she's talking about a more modern technology. So she's talking about facial recognition and AI and that kind of stuff. Same problem, 100% same problem.
Yeah.
But what I love about her work is this principle, and this came out of a conversation between her and Brené Brown, the human in the loop. Yeah. This technology is complete garbage without humans guiding it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good principle to hold.
And remember, we talk about that lack of self-awareness, unconscious bias that all humans have. You have a human in the loop. The algorithm's going to be biased in a particular way.
But the point is having the diversity of thought of humans as well, not just one human. And this is where she talked about like facial recognition software has been trained on white male faces.
Yeah, exactly.
And therefore, and I think the algorithms are trained by the people who program the
Absolutely.
algorithms. So who are those people?
And also, if those people are in their own filter bubble, and they're talking to people that
That's
look
exactly
like them,
right.
you know, like
So this
you
gets
get
into
this doom
it's
spiral.
compounding, isn't it? Yeah.
So back to Pariser. I think the book is weakest on what do you do about it.
Yes.
You know, like
yes.
he basically says
Or
exposure.
is that a symptom of our time, maybe as well? Is maybe it that I can't even put myself back in 2010, 11, but that point is, we didn't know what's coming, eh? It's like we're sitting in a different time now, and I think we've had all this experience of this under our belt, so maybe we are. I don't know.
But those are yes.
But yes, your point
those
is right,
ideas.
yeah.
You know, read outside your interests, talk to people.
Yeah,
that
they're
look like you.
basic
all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. But it all feels like work. And that's why the Lippmann and Dewey thing's interesting, because Lippmann and Dewey are going, well, democracy and civil society rests on this obligation for you to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And Pariser kind of picks up on that, but he doesn't go hard at it.
Yeah, and maybe that's a really key point, isn't it? Is that this is hard.
Yeah. And the thing that I thought about is this reminds me of that great book by that guy Bishop called The Great Sort, which is people increasingly sort into groups of people that think alike.
Yeah.
And it's happening residentially and it's happening online, it's happening all of that. And the problem with that is then you are absolutely stuck in these self-fulfilling circles where everybody thinks alike.
Yeah.
And everybody's ideas.
Which just plays on our biases, doesn't it? Because that's, the biases, the human biases that make life easy.
Exactly.
You know, like
which is why we need to talk about critical thinking, but that's another
thing. We'll do that another day. But
have you talked to anybody about this book?
I think I did. Yeah. I remember when I read it. I quite often do this when I'm reading something. I'll share it with everyone around me. But
hey, well,
have I heard this? Or people, people increasingly go, "What are you reading at the moment?" And this is a really interesting book. But I just think it's I'm with you. I do think there's a lot in there that could be. I don't know if it's quite a book that could have been an article.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the point is, I think it had some really good things which.
So my question for you, and I'm sure we're going to pick this up in a future episode, does the whole thing get subsumed under just be a more critical thinker?
I think it probably does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean that. Given that that's what one of the things
we do talk about a bit,
having the skills to understand that you're being fed particular information, and that if you like it, if it's playing to your confirmation bias, it will process really quickly.
Yes,
you've got to be on your guard for all that shit.
Yes, when it's easy,
be
on your guard.
Processing things. I think it's a great place to wrap it up.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thanks so much.
Cheers.